Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Attorney Job Vlogger, Law for the Everyday Layman. Today we continue with law on negotiable instruments, and we'll be talking about the rules on checks. So if you like my videos and you want to see more, please hit the subscribe button. Also, please remember that this is only for educational purposes and is not a substitute for proper legal advice or for studying and understanding the law. Okay, now what are checks? Okay, a check is simply a bill of exchange drawn on a bank, payable on demand, or it is a written order addressed to a bank or persons carrying on the business of banking by a party who has money in their hands, requesting them to pay on presentment to a person named in that check or his order, or to bearer, okay, a sum certain in money. Okay, so since a check is a bill of exchange, the rules on bills of exchange will apply to checks. However, there are differences, no? A check is always drawn on a bank. A bill of exchange may be drawn on an individual or a bank. Okay? A check is always payable on demand, while a bill of exchange may be payable on demand or at a fixed or determinable future time. Okay? A check is drawn against a previous deposit of funds, while this is not necessary for a bill of exchange. Okay? A check doesn't have to be presented for acceptance, but in a bill of exchange, there are instances when a bill of exchange has to be presented for acceptance. A check is usually intended for immediate payment, and the bill of exchange is intended for circulation, no? As an instrument of credit. Okay? A check, when it comes to the death of a drawer, no? The death of a drawer with the knowledge of the bank revokes the authority of the bank to pay the check. Okay? But in a bill of exchange, even if the drawer dies, it does not revoke the authority of the drawee to pay. Okay? A check must be presented for payment within a reasonable time after its issue. Okay, which is usually 180 days or 6 months. Okay, while a bill of exchange should be presented for payment within a reasonable time after its last negotiation. And what is a reasonable time? We take into account the nature of the instrument, the usage of trade or business, and the circumstances of the case. Okay? Now, if a check is not presented within a reasonable time after its issue, then the drawer is discharged to the extent of the loss caused by the delay. Okay? It becomes a stale check, no? And in case of a bill of exchange, if it is not presented within a reasonable time after last negotiation, then the drawer is totally discharged. Okay? Again, in the check, only to discharge only to the extent of the loss caused by the delay, and in bill of exchange, total discharge of the drawer. And finally, when a check is accepted or certified, the drawer and endorsers are discharged from liability. But when a bill of exchange is accepted, the drawers and endorsers, the drawer and the endorsers may be still liable. Okay, now there are different types of checks, no? Let's take them up one by one, different types of checks. There's what is called a memorandum check, no? And it is simply a check given by a borrower to a lender for the amount of a short loan, no? With the understanding that it is not to be presented at the bank, ha? Okay, but it will be redeemed by the maker himself when the loan falls due. Okay, this understanding is evidenced by the writing of the word memorandum, memo, or even mem, okay, on the check. Now, we also have a cashier's check, okay, and this is a check drawn by the cashier of a bank in the name of the bank against the bank itself, payable to a third person. Take note, it is a primary obligation of the issuing bank and accepted in advance upon issuance. Okay, so it is really the bank's own check, and it may be treated as a promissory note with the bank as the maker. Okay, it operates as an assignment of funds, no? But this is subject to the rule in oblicon. I'll talk about this later. Okay, some cases have held that it's an assignment of funds, but the prevailing rule is that it is not. Okay, so if the check is drawn by a bank upon another bank, it's now called a bank draft. Okay. Now, another kind of check is the manager's check. Okay, it's drawn by the manager of a bank in the name of the bank itself, payable to a third person. Okay, it's similar to a cashier's check, no, as to the effect and its use, but by issuing it, the bank assumes the liabilities of an acceptor under the section 62 of the Negotiable Instruments Law. Okay, we also have what is known as a traveler's check. Okay, and it is simply one which the holder's signature must appear twice. First, the signature must be affixed at the time of the issuance of the traveler's check. And second, there must be a counter signature affixed in the presence of the payee before it is paid. Otherwise, if there is no counter signature, it is incomplete. Okay, the purpose of a traveler's check is to provide the traveler with a safe and convenient method by which to supply himself with funds, no? Okay, in almost all parts of the world. Kaya nga travelers, di ba? Okay, without the hazard of carrying money on his person. The bank issuing the instrument has the right to refuse to pay it when it does not bear the countersign agreed upon, and the owner of the check has the right to insist that it shall not be paid if it is not countersigned. Okay? Now we also have a certified check, no? This is simply one which bears on its face an agreement whereby the drawee bank, no, meaning the bank against whom a check is drawn, undertakes to pay it at any time, at any future time, no, when it is presented for payment. Okay, so how do you know it's certified? There is the word certified stamped on the check, and the purpose is to enable the holder to use it as money. Okay, it enables persons who are not well acquainted with each other to quickly close business transactions. Why? Because the holder of that certified check knows that he can compel the drawee bank to encash it, so it avoids the delay of receiving, counting, and passing large sums of money from hand to hand, no? Take note, under section 186, where the holder of a check procures it to be accepted or certified, the drawer and all endorsers are discharged from liability. Okay, so that's one of the effects. Now, the other effects, no? First, under section 187, no? Certification is equivalent to acceptance. Okay, it is the operative act that makes banks liable. Okay? Second, under section 188, if the certification is obtained by the holder, then it discharges the person secondarily liable on the check. Okay? The theory is that the money of the drawer with the drawee bank, no, is taken from his control and appropriated already for the payment of the check. Okay, so it is as if the holder has drawn the money, redeposited it, and taken a certificate of deposit for it, no? But take note that the rule is only for the holder. If the certification is taken by someone else, like let's say the drawer, no, then the secondary parties are not discharged. Okay, because the holder has not yet received payment. Okay, next effect, no, under section 189 is that certification operates as an assignment of funds of the drawer in the hands of the drawee to the holder. Okay, it's an assignment or transfer. Okay, and fourth, no, the payee or the holder becomes the depositor of the drawee bank with the rights and duties in such a situation. No, finally, the drawer may not issue a stop payment order once the check has been certified. Okay, so what is this certification of checks, no? So the moment the check is certified, the fund cease to be under the control of the drawer, and they are no longer his. Okay, it's the same as if the bank had paid the money on the check. So the funds represented by the check are now transferred, okay, from the credit of the drawer to that of the payee by the holder, payee or the holder, no? So the payee or the holder now becomes the depositor of the drawee bank with the corresponding rights of such person, no? Another kind of check is the crossed check, no? And this is very important, no? Cross-check is one which bears across its face two parallel lines, no, drawn diagonally, usually on the upper left side, no? So there are two lines on the upper left side of the check, and crossing can be done either specially or generally. When a check is crossed specially, no, the name of a particular bank or company is written or appears between the parallel lines, no? So there's something written there, either the name of a particular bank or a company, okay? In which case, the drawee bank must pay the check only upon presentment by such bank or company. Now, when it is crossed generally, okay, only the words "and company," no, are written between the parallel lines, or when nothing at all is written in between the two lines in the upper left corner. Okay? Two parallel lines, no? Okay? Okay? In such a case, no, the check is crossed generally, okay, the drawee bank must pay the check through the intervention of some bank. No, in actual practice, the check which is crossed generally is deposited with a bank by the holder where he keeps an account, and then the bank takes charge of the collection. But if it is crossed specially, he deposits it with the bank indicated between the parallel lines. Ha? Ganoon lang yon, no? In crossing the check generally, the holder can deposit in the bank where he has a deposit. He has a deposit niya, no? But if it's crossed specially, doon lang kung saan nakasulat, no? The bank which is written between the crossed lines, okay? So if it says BPI, they're only in BPI, okay? In both cases of crossing generally or crossing specially, a cross check can only be deposited, and it cannot be converted into cash. Take note, that's important, no? So the purpose of crossing a check is to ensure payment to the payee, particularly when the check is sent by mail or entrusted to an agent, no? But crossing of the check, just putting the two parallel lines, it does not destroy negotiability. Meaning, even if the check is crossed, you can still negotiate it further. Okay, it can pass from hand to hand, no? But just take note that a cross check cannot be encashed, but may only be deposited with the bank. Okay, it may be negotiated only once to a person with an account with the bank, and this is the most important thing to remember in case of a cross check, no? The crossing of a check serves as a warning, okay? It serves as a warning to the holder that the check has been issued for a definite purpose, and he must inquire if he received the check pursuant to this purpose. Otherwise, if he does not inquire, then he is not a holder in due course. Why? Because the effects of crossing a check relate to the mode of payment, meaning that the drawer had intended the check for deposit only by the rightful person, namely the payee named therein. Okay? So, take note, no? Take note that a check, whether manager's check or cashier's check, they're not legal tender, ha? Okay? It's very important. They're not legal tender. An offer of a check in payment of a debt is not a valid tender of payment, and it may be refused by the creditor. Okay? Please review your oblicon, no? A check does not operate as an assignment or transfer of funds of the drawer to the holder. It is simply an order by the drawer to pay the amount on the check upon presentment of such check up to the amount of the funds that the depositor has with the bank. Okay? Why? Because the relationship, remember, the relationship between the bank and the depositor is one of debtor and creditor. The bank is the debtor, the creditor is the depositor, and therefore it's governed by the provisions on simple loan, no? Please just watch my discussion on simple loan. Okay? It's I have a whole series on credit transactions. Please feel free to watch that. Okay? And finally, please just remember, remember your oblicon, that a check will only produce the effect of payment when it is encashed. My series on Oblicon is likewise complete. Please just watch that as well, no? Specifically, the rules on payment in the extinguishment of obligations. Okay? Now, when we talk about collection of checks, no, this is how it works. No, on the check's due date, no, a holder of the check may either proceed directly to the drawee bank and present the same for payment, or he can deposit the check in his own bank. No, I do this, no, in when I receive checks. No, I can either go to the bank that of the check. No, let's say the check is BPI. I can go to BPI and have it encashed, or I can just go to my own bank, let's say BDO, and then I'll deposit it in my account. Okay, I can do that, no? So, if I deposit it in my bank, no, let's say it's BDO, okay, then that bank BDO is known as the depository bank or the collecting bank. Okay, and it is only after the check has been cleared and collected from the drawee bank that the final credit is made in the payee depositor's account, meaning in my account. Okay, so again, let's say a person owes me a debt, and then he pays me with a check, a BPI check. Okay, and then I can either encash the check at BPI, or I can go to my bank BDO and deposit it in my account. Okay, if I deposit that check in my account, then the bank, that BDO, will now be known as the depository bank or collecting bank, and BPI will be the drawee bank. Okay, BDO is the collecting bank because it will collect the funds from the drawee, which is BPI. Okay, the drawer in that case is the person who made the check for me, and the drawee is BPI, no, the bank from which he asks to pay me. Okay, so my bank again, BDO, is depository or collecting bank, drawee bank is BPI, and the drawer is the person who made the check for me. Now, I mentioned clearing, no, and clearing of checks is important, no. So how does it work? No, when a check is sent to the clearinghouse, no? In the Philippines, it's the Philippine Clearinghouse Corporation, no? PCHC. Okay, so when a check is sent to the clearinghouse, the collecting bank acts as the agent of the depositor. Okay, the collecting bank does not become the owner of the amount covered by the check. Okay, because that is only being collected from the drawee bank for the principal, who is the depositor, no? And those who transact checks with banks, no, or have experience in going to banks for with checks, no, they will be aware of the one-day clearing system, no, provided that the check is deposited before the cut-off time in the bank, no, which is under the check image clearing system, the CICS, which allows for electronic presentment and processing of checks. What does this mean? This just means that depositors who transact with banks that are compliant with the CICS can now withdraw the funds, no, against their validated check deposits on the next day. One-day clearing system lang. Okay? Before, it used to be 3 to 5 days. Now, one-day system. Okay? This system also provides for enhanced security, no? So, there are certain rules that must be followed because the transactions are now more secure, no? The check should be sufficiently funded, of course, no? You should fill up the check using dark-colored ink, and you cannot use pencil or something that can be erased, like erasable ink, okay? Also, no erasures are allowed, no? Even if you countersign, no? I've had an experience like this where someone tried to pay me and they erased, they struck out with a line a certain part of the check and put their signature. Before, that was accepted, but nowadays the bank will not accept that. Okay, so even if the alterations are signed, this will result in the refusal of the check. Okay, also you should end the amount in words, no, 1,000 pesos only, with the word only. Okay, and do not staple, do not crumple, do not fold the checks. Why? Because it will be read electronically. Okay, and the crumpling, etc., may interfere with that. So as a general rule, if a bank refuses to pay a check, even if the funds are sufficient, the payee or the holder of the check cannot sue the bank, ha? Okay, the payee should, if the bank does not want to pay, the payee cannot sue the bank. Okay, why? Remember your oblicon, there is no privity of contract or there is no contractual relation between the payee and the drawee bank. Okay, the payee should instead sue the drawer because it is the drawer that is ultimately liable to the payee. And if the drawer is made to pay, then the remedy of the drawer is to sue the bank. Okay, but there are situations when the banks may validly refuse to pay the check. Okay, first is if the bank is insolvent. Second, if the drawer's deposit is insufficient, okay, or he has no account with the bank, no? Okay, those two instances in particular, they're involved in BP 22 or the bouncing checks law. I'll make a separate video on that, no? Okay, or when the account has been closed, as I said, no, or if the account has been garnished. Why? Because the bank has no obligation to make a partial payment on the check, no, even if let's say the drawer makes a check for a certain amount, then the funds are insufficient, the bank has no obligation to make partial payment, no? Why? Because the holder of the check cannot be compelled to surrender the check to the bank. Okay, and the bank will have no evidence that it paid that amount, nor it will have no voucher. Okay, it will not be able to cancel the check because it does not have it in its possession. Okay, another case when a bank may validly refuse to pay on the check, no, is when the drawer is insolvent and proper notice is received by the bank. Okay, another situation is when the drawer dies and proper notice is received by the bank. Another situation is when the drawer has countermanded payment. Another situation is when the holder refuses to identify himself, no? Usually, you're asked to give IDs, no? Another situation where the bank may validly refuse to pay is when the bank has reason to believe that the check is a forgery. And finally, the bank can refuse to pay if the check is stale or post-dated. No? Of course, if it's post-dated, it's not yet due because the date has not yet arrived. But now let's talk about stale checks. Okay? So what's a stale check? A stale check is simply one which has not been presented for payment within a reasonable time after its issue. Okay, so the rule is, no, a check must be presented for payment within a reasonable time after its issue or the drawer will be discharged from liability thereon to the extent of the loss caused by the delay. That's section 186. I mentioned this earlier, no? So remember, even if the check is presented for payment within a reasonable time after its issue, the drawer will be discharged if he is not given notice of dishonor within the prescribed period. Okay? So, this stale check, no? This stale check is a valueless thing, no? It does not have any value and should not be paid. And what is a reasonable time? In common banking practice, it is 180 days or 6 months. Okay, and if it is past that date, the check is stale, and banks will normally not pay such a check without first consulting the depositor or drawer. Okay, so that's it for the rules on checks, no? And I'll be making a separate video on Batas Pambansa bilang 22 or the bouncing checks law. Okay, so please just wait for that. So I hope you may have picked up a thing or two, and I hope to see you soon, guys. Okay, bye.